All right, let's talk about one of my favorite modern mysteries. It's this incredible story about art, about obsession, and a secret that's been hiding in plain sight. At the one place on Earth you'd think could crack any code, the CIA.
I mean, you just have to love the irony here, right? We're talking about an agency that's all about espionage and intelligence, a building packed with the absolute best codebreakers in the world, and for years they were stumped by a puzzle sitting right in their own backyard. It's no wonder this story grabbed everyone's attention. It completely flips the script on what we think about secrets.
Okay, so picture this. We're in Langley, Virginia, the heart of the U.S. intelligence community. And a sculptor gets this really unique challenge. Create a piece of art that is secrecy itself. Not just about it, but actually embodies it.
And this is what he came up with, Kryptos. The name literally comes from the Greek word for hidden, which is just perfect. It was dedicated way back in 1990, and the artist, James Sanborn, was supposed to create something that celebrated intelligence gathering. But oh man, he did so much more than that. He didn't just make a symbol of a secret, he built a real, actual secret right into the sculpture.
So the main part of Kryptos is this huge S-shaped copper screen, and it's covered in 1,735 letters. And to make sure this code was the real deal, Sanborn actually worked with a retiring CIA cryptographer. How cool is that? Together they cooked up a puzzle with 4 different parts, and each one gets harder than the last. It's designed to be a real challenge.
And this, right here, is what makes Kryptos so genius. Sanborn himself said that just decoding the letters, well, that's only step 1. The messages you uncover, they're riddles themselves. So even when you think you've cracked it, you've just unlocked another layer of mystery. It's a true puzzle within a puzzle.
So the challenge was laid down. How on earth did the world's smartest people, we're talking spies and regular folks alike, even begin to tackle this massive copper enigma?
Well, the sculpture actually gave them a pretty big hint. Part of it is a giant Visionaire table. That's a classic tool for code breaking. So that told everyone, hey, you're probably looking at a Visionaire cipher here. Now that type of cipher uses a keyword to scramble the letters. Simple enough, right? The problem was, nobody knew what the keywords were. And without them, you're just staring at a wall of gibberish.
For almost 10 years, nothing. The code was completely unbreakable. Then, in 1998, a CIA analyst named David Stein, get this, cracked the first 3 parts using just a pencil and paper. Old school. And then, just a year later, a computer scientist, Jim Gilligley, did the exact same thing from his house, but he used a Pentium 2 computer. It's just the perfect contrast, you know? Pure brain power versus raw computer muscle.
But wait, because here comes the twist. It's straight out of a movie. It turns out the NSA, the National Security Agency, had secretly solved those first 3 parts years earlier, all the way back in 1992. They did it in just a couple of years and then told nobody. They just sat back and let their buddies over at the CIA sweat it out for another 6 years. You can't make this stuff up. So, the big question is, what did these messages actually say? What was hiding in plain sight for all that time? Well, as you might guess, the answers just made the whole thing even more mysterious.
Okay, so the first part, K1, used the keyword palimpsest, and the message is, well, it's kind of poetic and weird. It says, between subtle shading and the absence of light lies the nuance of occlusion. And yeah, you saw that right, IQ-lusion. That's a deliberate misspelling of illusion. Sanborn threw it in there just to mess with people, a classic misdirection.
Then we get to the second part, K2, and things get even stranger. It talks about something totally invisible and asks, who knows the exact location? Only WW. Then it just gives a set of GPS coordinates, and those coordinates, they point to a spot just a stone's throw away from the sculpture itself, right there in the courtyard. And WW? Most people are pretty sure that stands for William Webster, the head of the CIA when Kryptos went up.
Now for K3, Sanborn changed things up. He used a different kind of code, a transposition cipher. So instead of swapping letters for other letters, this one just scrambles the order. Once they figured that out, they found it was a quote from the Diary of Howard Carter, you know, the guy who discovered King Tut's tomb. It describes the moment he looked inside. That last letter Q is probably a stand-in for the question he was asked, can you see anything? Okay, so 3 parts down, 1 to go. The world now had 3 cryptic riddles, but the final piece of the puzzle was still out there, the last 97 characters. This is K4, and this is where the real obsession began, an obsession that would last for decades. I mean, this last part wasn't just a code anymore. It became a legend. For more than 30 years, K4 was like the holy grail for codebreakers everywhere. It was their Mount Everest, this impossible peak that everyone from basement hobbyists to professional cryptographers was desperate to conquer.
So as the years dragged on, Sanborn himself must have felt a little bad for everyone. He started dropping clues. He'd confirmed that a certain chunk of letters meant Berlin, another one meant clock, and then northeast and east. These were huge hints. But even with that help, the full message stayed a complete mystery. So stubborn.
You have to understand, for decades, the absolute best minds in the world threw everything they had at K4, every technique, every supercomputer. And for decades, K4 just sat there, unsolved. It really felt like it was going to be one of those great permanent mysteries. But then, the story took a really, really weird turn.
And this is where things get really wild. Now, this next part is based on a really fascinating, though not officially confirmed story about how this whole saga supposedly ends. So the story goes like this. In 2023, Sanborn donates all his papers to the Smithsonian. Then, imagine this. In 2025, a couple of researchers are just going through the archives and they accidentally find the complete plaintext solution to K4. Whoops. The Smithsonian, in a panic, supposedly seals the documents for 50 years. But it's too late. The cat's out of the bag, and this apparently prompts Sanborn to just auction off his entire archive.
So in this version of the endgame, what's a 35-year-old secret worth? Well, the whole collection, including the key to one of the most famous puzzles in the world, allegedly sells to some anonymous buyer for, get this, $963,000. Absolutely staggering.
Just let that sink in for a second. After all that work, decades of brainpower from thousands of people all over the world, the great Kryptos puzzle isn't solved by some brilliant codebreaker. No, the solution is just found by accident in a library basement and then sold off to the highest bidder. A secret that was this global obsession suddenly becomes private property.
And that just leaves us with this one last nagging thought. If this is really how it ends, with one single person holding the answer, what does that even mean for the puzzle? Does a mystery just die when the solution is bought and sold but never shared? Was the real value of Kryptos in the journey, and all of us trying to solve it together? Or is it only about knowing the final answer? I'd love to know what you think.